Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello, and welcome back to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we're going to continue our quest for the truth regarding health and healthy lifestyle and building a healthy community. And today we're going to talk about simplicity and finding the truth. And, you know, we live in a very complicated world right now, and information and people and everything about our world is complex. And at the same time, you know, people are living longer than they've lived in all history, really. And you think about that and you say, okay, well, what is what? And unfortunately, most people, I think, draw conclusions without looking at all the facts. And when you're trying to find facts, the more complicated a situation is, the more difficult it is to solve. You know, they still don't understand the human body in many ways. They don't understand cancer. They don't understand the brain. They're learning more and more things. But the truth is, as science is discovering itself, it's wrong most of the time. It's wrong more than it's right, or it's right about a thing, and then they come to realize, well, there's these other things. And, you know, in working with cannabis medicine for so long, I've always said, we're never going to know these answers entirely because you can't prove it. You know, you have a plant that has hundreds of compounds, and we have people making these claims, well, this does this, and this does that. And you don't know. You just don't know. You can isolate a compound and say, well, this by itself does this. Okay, you can make some discoveries that way. You can prove some things. You can demonstrate systems, and you can demonstrate mechanics of things. But the second you have 2 or 3 things or hundreds of things involved, there is no way to know what is causing what. Maybe these 14 things put together in this one way cause this other thing to behave differently. Well, it happens all the time. And yet you have people touting, buy this because it does this, and buy that because it does that. And I say, you know what? Try this and see what it does for you. And if it's safe, then so be it. But the problem is, a lot of misinformation comes because of things being complicated, all the way to relationships. You know, if you think about it, our diet, the electronics in our life, the communication, just information straight up. You know, it used to be, where did you get information from back in the old days? You know, somebody would tell you a thing. I heard from somebody, or a song, or you know, somebody traveled along with the news from the town before, and then that turned into, you know, all of a sudden they're printing paper, and then somebody could write something down, and then you could pass that around, and then, you know, sound starts traveling, and all of a sudden people can transmit sound in telegraphs, and then that goes to where it is today, where, you know, information is ubiquitous. There's no getting away from it. And as well as that is amazing and good, it also makes things complicated, and it creates a place for misinformation and confusion to happen, maybe more than ever. And so, while knowledge is increasing at expanding rates, it's also disseminating misinformation. And so now we live in this world where, you know, you talk to 20 people and they're going to tell you every side of a thing and say, well, science says this and this and this. And the other person is going to turn around and say, no, the exact opposite is true. So, for example, while I'm battling this squamous cell carcinoma, I went from thinking I knew something about cancer and how it works to finding out I have cancer, to being told by people everything you can imagine from, well, cancer is a virus, cancer is a parasite, cancer is this, cancer is that. Well, you can just do this, you can do that. And all the different things people have told me, holy shit, if you could just put yourself into my spot as somebody seeking truth and considering everybody's input and then getting hit with every possible thing, good and bad, could be possibly true or not. And I got stuck in a spot where I'm like, well, I got to start figuring this out for myself. And so I started isolating things and trying one thing and trying another thing and looking at statistics and looking at talking to people who have dealt with it. And unfortunately, you find out, again, somebody discovered a thing and they attribute it to a thing. So, for example, lots of people that I've run into, well, you can remove tumors just by eating this fruit. Okay, so let's stop and think about that. Somebody has a tumor and they're going through their life trying to solve it, and they find this fruit and they start eating it. And then, in addition, what else are they doing? Are they eating other shit food? Are they eating a bunch of meat and dairy? Are they living a stressful life? Are they subjecting themselves to toxins? Are they in a place with parasites or all these things, right? But they're eating this fruit, and all of a sudden the tumor starts going away. So they're like, oh, well, the fruit must have caused it. And so then they go around selling fruit, and they're like, look at this fruit, it'll cure your cancer. And the truth is, unfortunately, there will be somebody, I guarantee you, that's going to believe this person and their fruit, and they're going to not go on their own quest to find their own truth, and they're going to end up dying because they believe this poor bastard and their fruit. And I'm not saying that the fruit isn't the answer for this one person. I'm saying there are not blanket answers for people. And if you don't look for your truth, you could miss it, and it could have fatal consequences. So let's start looking at these things, the simplicity of things. And how do you look at the diets. People who used to die of foodborne illnesses. They used to die of starvation a lot more than they do today. Waterborne illnesses. Okay, so we say to yourself, well, the food today must be better than the food of older times. Well, is that true or not? Look at the food we eat today. It's complicated. And look at the food people ate in older times. It was simple. But what's the difference? Well, we know about hygiene. We know about cleaning food. We know about eating bad food. We know about bacteria, fungus, disease, parasites, and all these things. Back then, they ate what they could because there wasn't anything else to choose from. Today, we have abundant, cheap, shit food all over the place, and it's actually pretty hard to find good, clean, simple food. But what's happening? People are obese now. There wasn't a lot of obese people back in the old days. You know why? Because there wasn't a lot of food. Well, there probably wasn't a lot of diabetes, and there wasn't a lot of the same problems that we have today. So, let's get down to simplifying things. We talked about fasting. We talked about reducing things. We talk about simplifying things. So one of the simplest things to do if you want to find some answers is start at your diet. And, maybe start with a fast, start with a 3-day water fast and say, okay, let's reset and let's start with 0. And then if you want to figure out maybe what's causing your problem, you start a very simple diet. Maybe you start with just a juice and you say, well, how do I do with that? And then maybe you introduce some fruits and vegetables and you say, how do I do with that? And then you start introducing things and seeing how you do. And all of a sudden you may find as you introduce a food into your diet, whoa, I'm feeling weird. Well, that's how you can start to isolate things. You can start to find your answers. You can also do complicated genetic tests and find out, yeah, that's true, but who gets to do that? The people that can afford it. And so we're looking for simple truths. We're looking for truths that, can apply across the board. And by simply reducing the things that you eat, and looking at how they act. So, for example, when I was younger, I was full of allergies. And initially they were trying to find out, what's wrong? Why do you always have a stuffy nose, postnasal drip, asthma, bronchitis? And the allergist at the time says, well, try eliminating milk and chocolate, I think it was. And so we did, and sure enough, my nose cleared up some. And so we assumed from that, I had sensitivities. And we went through a couple of different foods, and some of them seemed to reduce my stuffiness and others didn't. But milk, definitely, I learned that when I drink milk or eat dairy more, I'll have more mucus. Okay, well, I think I could make an assumption based on that. And, today it seems like everybody's got these giant food sensitivities, but why is that? Are we eating the foods that we used to? No, we're not. Foods today are processed in ways that they never were. And in some cases, that's supposed to be for our health, pasteurization and irradiation, and some of these things they do are to kill pathogens and are supposed to make food more stable and be cleaner. But at the same time, they're rendering them, they're changing them. Every time you run food through a process, it's more complicated, number one, and it takes things apart. It changes them. And I have this to say, as I'm going through this journey in healing myself from cancer, my diet was the most significant thing that had to change. And I have a very simple diet now. And, I lost another 30 pounds from where I was. I'm way too thin right now, but it's in my benefit as I'm fighting these tumor cells to not have additional weight and have additional nutrients in my body right now. So we're balancing this very carefully. But I also know that the food that I eat right now is very clean and very direct to source. So when it comes to processing, I don't have any processed food right now. If anything, it's warmed, maybe boiled a little bit, but things are not, there's not multiple ingredients in my food. If you look at any package of any food or any recipe of anything, you're not going to find anything less than a dozen ingredients. And you're going to find ingredients that you don't know what they are, you don't know what they do, and you don't know how they're affecting your complicated chemistry. So as we're looking for answers, and you say to yourself, well, you got to listen to your body. If you're going to listen to doctors, you think about, what are you doing? And I'm not saying don't listen to doctors. Doctors are like anybody. If they have a large body of knowledge and they practice and they know things because they practice. So certainly they can have answers that can help you. But do they know you? Do they know your complicated chemistry? Do they know your history? Do they know the details? Do they even care? Are they going to bother to ask? And that's something you got to pay attention to. If somebody's going to give you an answer based on limited information, how good is that answer likely to be? How does that work, right? And why are doctors wrong so much? Why do doctors make fatal errors? Why do doctors prescribe drugs that don't cure, but cover up symptoms more than anything? And everybody's on these drug cocktails, and even they're trying to do this to me with potential therapies. And before I've even started therapy, I've got 12 prescriptions. Well, I haven't taken any of them except for a couple of supplements, because I know that this cascade of prescriptions becomes untenable, and then people spend a lifetime trying to undo them. But you don't realize how complicated things are. So, there's a quote out of the Bible that, God speaks to you in a still small voice. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. And as I'm going through this journey and seeking truth, I've learned that quieting myself and listening to my body, simplifying things to the point where I can tell when something changes, paying attention to the simple things like bowel movements and urinating and the moisture in your mouth and how you breathe and pain levels, stress levels, things like that. When you're living a busy life, you can't possibly notice these things. When you get up and you're thinking of 100 things and people are calling you, texting you, emailing you, and then you've got radios and TVs and podcasts and all these things that are just bombarding you, and you don't have time to sit with any of them and really absorb, well, what are you going to notice? How are you going to hear a still small voice in a crowded room where everybody's talking? So I think it's imperative. I know as I'm walking down this journey, I've spent a lot of time with different plant medicines. I've spent time with people who have worked on me with energy. And what happens when that happens is you sit quietly. And I've spent a lot of time in a meditative state. Even when I can't sleep because of pain, I'll just sit there and sit with it and try to experience what I'm experiencing and try to feel what's happening. And, it's interesting. I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that I have a better connection to my body and to my intuition now than I ever have before. And looking back, I can see that in the rare cases when I did listen to my intuition, it guided me well. And so you think to yourself, some people have really strong intuitions and they'll go through life with a feeling and they act on a feeling. And in some cases, it can be very beneficial. Other times, feelings end up being emotions and people make a lot of poor choices because they act on feelings. But I think that as I'm going through this, I am regulating my metabolism with diet and fasting, and literally I've come to a place, and it doesn't make me anything. It just means I'm listening to my body. And as I'm going with a goal of upregulating or downregulating or modulating my fuel sources from glucose to fats, ketones, trying to avoid breaking down my own muscle tissue and coming right up to the line of that, I've been able to realize there's even times when I was like, okay, you can have 2 macadamia nuts and that'll get you through. I'm like, whoa, where did I get that thought? Right? Where would you get that from? Except for if you're communicating, with your cells in some way. I don't know how it works. I just know that as we simplify things, I think we find more answers. And I think that in fasting, sometimes thinking about taking time off of electronics, turning the TV off, just spending time and having a conversation with people, spending time by yourself thinking about something or sitting down and reading or listening to a book only, or not having 12 things happening at once. People talk about multitasking as a good thing. It's one of the worst things you can do. And we live this life just full of multiple windows open in our lives. And how can you get answers out of that? Consider relationships and starting to be honest about them. People have this need to be validated and to be liked and to be listened to. And so we go to places like social media and we get bombarded with information and opinions and it creates more tension than it does community in so many ways. And yet you can find community there. But just imagine having one person that would balance the bar that you hold relationships to, and have one person who actually listens to you, actually one person who wants good for you, who smiles when you do well and cries when you're in pain, who invites you to their house and shares a meal with you, who never talks bad about you or would stand up behind your back, or who would do something for you that you wouldn't maybe do for yourself. Those are real relationships and people. And then you think about everything else and all the other different kinds of people and reasons why people are hanging out. You have a person who comes to you and talks to you and doesn't have anything to gain from you other than just your company. Well, that's something to pay attention to. And it's hard because we have this deep need to be validated and to be listened to and to be loved. And yet most of the people that we say or believe are doing that are in complicated ways serving themselves. So I think if we can just take a minute and start to let go of some of the things that are cluttering our life and just take note. I'm going to let this go for a little while and see, do I miss it? Is it serving me? Is it, and if it's not, maybe let it go for a while. And then you start to find you can see other things more clearly. And as you let more and more things go and you get to a more simpler situation, think about vacation. You go from a complicated life to sitting on a beach or whatever it is you're doing. And why is that so restorative? Because you're not doing all the things. You go to a place where you're eating simple food, you're having simple pleasures, sitting in the sun, feeling a breeze on your face, having conversation with people, whatever, maybe having a drink or smoking some weed or whatever the thing that makes you relax and feel nice is. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's where you find healing. That's where you find answers. People go on a vision quest, or they go, on a hike, or they go and they find answers. What do? They get away. They go to climb the mountain or whatever is their place. So I really think that considering simplicity has a huge value in finding answers and even in promoting health itself. And I certainly welcome your thoughts. And if you're interested in participating in this podcast as a guest or supporting it as a sponsor, let me know. We have subscriber content available. And if you think this podcast is valuable, please share it. Tell somebody about it. We're starting to get a little more visibility. And as a result, we're getting more and better quality guests. And I really believe this community is growing. And we have the foundation of a tremendous healing community where it doesn't require lots of money to find good answers. And we can share these answers that we find together, and it's there. It doesn't cost you anything, and it can give you a lot. So thank you for supporting the Healthy Living Podcast. We'll see you next time.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right, well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.